Well, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, last you heard, I had what seemed to be a little bit of a compression issue and a small drivability issue that I wanted to get rid of in this car since it is nice and all. And what I tracked down was low compression numbers. But what we learned in the last couple of videos is that my compression tester was actually not good. So the new compression tester has worked out better. And in the meantime, when I took it out for my first test drive, we found another issue. So stay tuned for all of this wonderful drama and more on today's episode of This Old G35. House, with your host, Bob Vila. Okay, and well, after everything went well, head swap on, and here are my modeling shots ready to go. I got everything nice and topped off and checked and zip tied and out of the way, and we're ready to make my initial hits and see what happens. And something happened indeed.
Is this thing on? Is this thing on? Check this out. I took it for a drive today in preparations to get it to the dyno because it wasn't pouring out today. It's still, obviously it's not very nice, but it was dry enough for me to roll into it in fourth. And I couldn't really tell a bunch of things. I messed around with the fuel. The good, there's good and bad. With all things, there's good and bad. The good is there's more fuel with the booster pump. The bad is I shredded the belt. The good is I was able to keep the belt, like the belt stayed with the car. And I bought a warranted, 1-year warranty Advanced Auto Parts belt. So I went and exchanged it. So I'm thinking to myself, like, why did the belt come off? Like, what's going on? I didn't really have any issues before. I even did, like, rev limiter gear changes and pretty aggressive driving. Didn't have problems. So I'm like, what's happening? So I got another belt. I go to install it, and it doesn't line up. I'm like, why doesn't my belt line up? I'm like, okay. So I put this guy in, I put the block in, and I realized the belt is like off with the block. And if you look down, the belt is back here. And I'm like, I'm like investigating my pulley. I'm like, what's going on? Well, that is supposed to be flush. So the insert slid out. So the press-on insert that the Olsen did slid out. And I hit him up and I'm like, dude, the insert slid. And I don't really hear anybody mentioning this. And he said it's the first time someone's had it happen. So this is what I get for building a nice car, apparently, is a slew of issues. And so I can't put my belt back on and I can't drive it. So I gotta pull this snout off and press this guy back, all the way back flush again so that it lines up with my belt. And then I'm just gonna have my buddy TIG weld the whole fucking thing. Just TIG weld it so it can't come out. So I did make a little bit more boost. It makes 15.6 pounds at 7,000 now. It picked up like, I have to check the other logs, honestly. I think it made 13.8. Now it makes 15.6, and a lot of people might not understand that. Part of it was the leak. The valve's leaking. The other part of it is I did a smaller chamber cylinder head. So, got to get that stuff fixed. Got to get the pulley back on. It felt more powerful. I've rolled into it once or twice in third, and it spun bad in third. So it could have been a combination. There's still some pieces of belt chilling in there. There's the pieces on the ground of the belt and the belt. So, yeah, I'm going to investigate. I'm going to peel the rest of the belt out. I got to pull the snout off, press the snout back in. I finally put coolant in my intercooler reservoir. I did not have that before. It was starting to look crappy, so I got to get some lube in there for the whole system and whatever else. So that's where we're at. I have fuel now. It looks like the booster pump. I left everything alone I had like a 13.1 wide open before. Now I have like an 11.2 at 7,000, so I'm hoping that I have enough fuel now. So we'll see how everything else weighs in. We'll fix my snout, mess with some other stuff, re-dyno, see if I made any more power. But that's where I'm at with this quick... It's not raining today, but can't fuck with the car. Figures, right?
So, and here we got Mr. Shreddy Boy and the aftermath, and me picking apart all the pulleys to get all these little nice bits out, and removing the snout, and then pressing the hub back on, and taking it to my buddy's shop to TIG weld it. I do have a TIG welder, but I do not have appropriate gas. And guys, have you ever seen me weld before? I mean, I wouldn't trust me to weld it on. And here is Ryan Gary of Area 1320 Subaru shop, welded my hub on nice to make sure that bitch doesn't fall off again. A little bit of junk burning off. And here is Bernie Boy McSnouterson, ready to bolt on again and test the waters. Now, here is where some extracurricular comes in, and, we just have to go over it. Obviously, I'm not here to point fingers, but I am here to give you guys the facts, and you can make your decisions from there. If we look back at these January 1st photos I took of the car, quote-unquote, complete, if we zoom in enough on the hub, we can see that the hub has already started walking off, and it's something that I missed. And obviously, I hit up Jesse immediately once this happened, and I didn't post anything on Sloppy, and I was like, hey, it looks like my hub walked off. And to my surprise, his first response was, well, of course yours falls off. He's like, over 100 of these, and yours falls off. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess from that answer, I'm fixing this myself. I will, hammer this back on or press it and weld it. And he's like, yeah, just press it and weld it. And, in hindsight, thinking about it now, I'm like, maybe a small apology would have been nice. I paid decent money and waited a long time for this to get done, and I don't even know if I have 500 or 1,000 miles on this, and the hub walks off. So that's kind of crappy. And he says this has never happened before, but what I did was I asked him about it, I showed him it, and all he really said was, of course this happens to you. And part of my concern is, well, I'm like a fairly visible person for this transaction, so maybe you want to double check it or triple check it. And then what I feel like is unfair to consumers is maybe I get a better product than you guys do, but if this is how he represents himself to me, where he knows people are going to see what happens, I like to be fairly transparent. I don't, even now, like my wife would kill me. Even now, I don't feel like, vilifying him, but I feel like he could have handled it better. He could have shown at least some concern or offered to fix it. At this point, he took so long to do the initial work. I don't think I would have sent it in. So that's the whole other caveat to this. I don't think I would have sent it back to him because I don't know how long it would have taken to get it back. And I literally, I held the snout in my left hand and bumped it on with like a 3-pound mini sledge with like very minimal deformation to the hub. And I'm like, man, should I be able to just bump this on this easy? It was not hard to do. He claims the interference fit is nice and tight, but as you can look at this and think, well, it's backspaced quite a bit, and maybe you shouldn't do that at all. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe I shouldn't even be doing that. And that's just the service he offers, and it's like a hope this works for you kind of thing. But this is all stuff you need to think about, I guess, if you're planning on doing this. It seems like he says there's no issues, but there were a bunch of people that reached out to me after I made a post that said they had similar issues. So, I don't know if they just never reached out to him because the initial took so long they didn't want to bother, or if he is hiding it or what. But the other ugly part of this is I made a post on Sloppy hours later after he didn't seem to care and was like, yeah, just fix it yourself. Matt's got a TIG, he'll fix it. Well, I mean, my buddy sent me a TIG as a housewarming gift. Dude, I don't know how to TIG. I don't have appropriate gas for my TIG. I'm not skilled at TIG welding. So to just assume that I would fix this on my own after spending $800 is kind of shitty. Maybe you were like, well, you just want to fix it on your own, but the offer was never on the table to investigate or I'm sorry this happened. It shouldn't have happened. Can I check it out or can I fix it? Or none of that was ever said. Part of that bothers me. The customer service stuff isn't there. That's, beside the point. Maybe he doesn't care. So, but that's apparent. And I made the post on Sloppy. I didn't say anything inflammatory. I was like, this is what happened. I put my car back together, I ran up and down the street, and the fucking belt came off. And it was very close to knocking the entire pulley off, and what would have been awful is if this pulley or belt took out my nearly $2,000 radiator and fan setup from LOJ, none of which is his fault. And I would have to replace that on top of the work that I need to have done to have this fixed. So just part of that, in hindsight, rubs me the wrong way. Initially, I'm like, wow, what happened? Maybe I did something wrong. And I guess, that's part of my attitude is maybe I did something wrong. And then afterwards, I posted it up and I'm like, my hub fell off. And then right away, like there's 150 comments and half of them are the Jesse Olsen dude defending himself and making strange claims like maybe I need to switch back to plated steel or maybe I need to weld them or maybe I need to whatever. And then he goes on like some sort of weird victim blaming thing where he's like, well, you weren't hurt, so it doesn't matter. Because my wife jumped on his back because she's like, dude, Matt would never say this, but that should have never fucking happened. So this is on you, and you didn't apologize. You didn't accept responsibility, and you're also handling it fairly unprofessionally for a guy that sells a supposed professional service representing a company. And he was like, well, you're kind of over-exaggerating, blah, blah, blah. Matt didn't die or lose any limbs. And, that is a funny way to respond for someone that's selling you a product for a decent amount of money that you have trouble with that's not, as far as I understand, was no account of my own. the hub came off, and it was something he did, and there is no express guarantee, but just the lack of remorse and apology is unsettling. It's still, I think, there's no one else that really does it. So, and he made claims to that, which is a shitty way to answer, in my opinion. Like, I'm the only guy that does this. That doesn't mean you do a shitty job and that you shrug at people when they have an issue. And on top of that, he could have worked with me hours before I even made a post, which I did not say, like, blah, blah, did a shitty job. He took too long and everything else, which is true. And, the fucking hub fell off with, like, less than an oil change in the car. It bothers me now. The more I think about it, the more it bothers me. Because if I just hadn't gone that route, wouldn't have wasted the time, and I wouldn't have had the fucking thing fall off. So, if you could listen to me soapbox about this for enough time, you can, make your own decision about whether or not you'd want to use this guy, because there are other people that used him that had no apparent physical issue, but they said the same thing, where they were fed excuses and a long timeline, and they had to badger him to get the product. And, seemingly, it's just like one of those impossible things. It's a machine shop type deal that I really hate, where people are like, I'm just going to drop my motor off at the machine shop and get bearings and shit. And then 6 months later, you don't have shit, and you spent $2,000, and you have to threaten a guy to get your fucking short block back. That whole situation is what pretty much kills your fucking product and your mood to finish your stuff. So anyway, I hope you can appreciate, and that's where I'm at with this whole ordeal. I mean, it shouldn't have happened, and I hope I don't have any issues coming forward, and I'll, blow up the image here of it walking off around the 1st, and then of me taking it for a drive and blowing the fucking snout off on the 3rd. Came off enough to throw my belt and disintegrate it. And, his comments are, again, like, kind of bullshit, where he's like, oh, so what, the belt came off. Dude, I had to spend half a day, like, running around, warranty exchange my belt, take my fucking snout off, RTV it, hours of my time. Just total lack of respect and remorse for that is a shitty thing. Flat out. Just did not respond well, and was arguing with people on Sloppy who were kind of like, well, maybe this is your problem, maybe you need to fix this, and just sidestepping it all. So, that's where I'm at. That's where we are. Hopefully I don't have any more fucking issues with this, because, I'm at the end of my rope with this fucking blower bullshit, because I don't know if I can fit an LSA crank and tensioner assembly with what I have, so I kind of have to deal with what I got for now, and I obviously don't want to go back down 250 horsepower. So that's where we are. Hopefully the dyno results are good and everything else is happy, and I can once again enjoy this vehicle in my new Seattle, Northeast Pennsylvania weather.